Does Palestine have agreed borders which define its territory?
I think I can't give legal advice on the application of those criteria to the committee. I think I would point the committee to...
It's a physical question, not a legal question. Does Palestine have agreed borders which define its territory?
I would refer that to DFAT.
Really?
Do you think that the peace agreement between Israel and Hamas is going to last? One of the interesting things that you'll note is before the peace agreement came about, there were some Western leaders who unfortunately gave power to Hamas by saying that they were open to the creation of a Palestinian state. Well, take a look at this clip over here with Senator Chandler from Australia. And she says something very interesting. She asked the international committees about, is this something that we have the ability to recognize right now? And listen to their answers. You're not going to want to miss it because it's extremely frustrating and entertaining at the same time. So watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
For recognition of a state at international law.
Recognition of a state is primarily a political decision.
At international law, it's a political decision to recognise a state. There must be some sort of legal definition that we use to determine whether something is a state.
There are some, traditional criteria that are relevant, but the ultimate decision of whether to recognise is a political one.
What are the traditional criteria?
They are a permanent population, a defined territory, a government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states.
So my understanding is those are the criteria set out under the Montevideo Convention, is that correct?
Correct.
So they're not traditional criteria, they're something that's set out under a convention.
But a decision whether to recognise is a political decision.
Does Palestine have agreed borders which define its territory?
I think I can't give legal advice on the application of those criteria to the committee. I think I would point the committee to...
It's a physical question, not a legal question. Does Palestine have agreed borders which define its territory?
I would refer that to DFAT.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Does Palestine have a single government in effective control of its territory?
Senator, I think this is in fact legal advice because it's the application of criteria, so it would be giving you advice on legal considerations.
I think these questions are in relation to factual matters, though, not legal advice that you may or may not have provided the government. The question is, does Palestine have agreed borders and do they have a single government? I would have thought that was a pretty straightforward, factual yes or no answer.
So, Senator, our involvement is with the Office of International Law as international legal advisors. Ms Sheehan's directed you to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Okay. Did the Office of International Law give advice to the government on whether Australia's recognition of a Palestinian state was legitimate?
We have given advice to government on the issue of recognition.
When was that advice provided, Ms Sheehan?
We need to take that on notice, I think.
Yeah, I think we might need to take on notice the precise dates. There would have been probably multiple occasions on which we provided advice.
Multiple occasions on which you provided advice?
Yes.
Over the scope of many years.
Many years. How many years, Ms Jones?
I think in my time in the department, this issue has come up numerous times, probably over the last 15 years.
Over the last 15 years?
But look, that's actually, I should be careful. I wouldn't be precise, but it's come up multiple times.
Okay, well, I think it would be useful for the committee to at least know how many times you've had to provide advice on this matter since the Labor government have been in power. And I'd hope that it would be relatively straightforward for some official here to provide that information to the committee before the end of this section of the program today. So when it became time for the government to make this specific recognition and this specific change in relation to recognition of Palestine, could you at least provide me with the date on which the Office of International Law gave advice to the government recently?
We'll take that on notice.
Okay. What's the capital of Palestine?
Senator, we can't comment on that.
Because you don't know, or because you're legally unsure?
Well, I think it's not a matter for this department, Senator.
Do you know what the capital of Israel is?
Senator, I don't think that's a matter within the Attorney General's responsibilities.
Was the Office of International Law asked for advice on any of these questions that I have asked you today?
We've agreed to take on notice the dates of advice we've given.
Was the Office of International Law ever asked to provide advice on whether a state can be recognised on a conditional basis?
Senator, I think that's starting to get into the content of advice that we wouldn't comment on.
Okay, generally speaking, can recognition of a state ever be conditional?
Senator, that would constitute legal advice.
I'm trying to figure out if I can phrase that in a way where it wouldn't constitute legal advice. I mean, going back to the evidence that you provided that apparently recognition of a state is a political question, but there is a legal framework under the Montevideo Convention that we utilise to make that determination. Does the Montevideo Convention allow for conditional recognition of a state?
I think that would be providing legal advice to the committee.
Okay. On the 11th of August, when the Prime Minister announced that Australia would recognise Palestine, he outlined a series of commitments which Australia had obtained in the course of the government's decision to recognise Palestine. The Prime Minister said, "Our government has made it clear that there can be no role for the terrorists of Hamas in any future Palestinian state. This is one of the commitments Australia has sought and received from President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority. The PA has reaffirmed it recognises Israel's right to exist in peace and security. It's committed to demilitarise and to hold general elections. It is pledged to abolish the system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs and promise broader reform of governance, financial transparency in the education system, including international oversight, to guard against the incitement of violence and hatred. These detailed and significant commitments have been given even greater weight by the Arab League's unprecedented demand for Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and surrender its weapons to the Palestinian authorities. But those commitments have no bearing on whether Palestine is recognised as a state legally. Would that be correct?"
I think the government's decision was to recognise the state of Palestine, and it's now done so.
Yes, but the Prime Minister outlined a series of conditions that he, or commitments that he had sought and seemingly obtained. But the reality is, when it comes to that legal recognition, there's no way of guaranteeing that those commitments would be seen through.
I think what my understanding of what the Prime Minister was setting out was what considerations the government was taking into account in its decision, which it's now taken to recognise.
But when we're trying to, when the government is going through the process of recognising that state, I mean, those commitments are all sort of future-looking things. There's no legal way of guaranteeing that those things have to occur before recognition can take place. Is that correct?
I think I would just repeat my earlier answer that they were political considerations, and it's ultimately a political decision to decide to recognise.
The Prime Minister obviously said in that quote that I just read out that Hamas can play no role in the future of a Palestinian state, if in due course Palestine holds elections and Hamas is elected, can we revoke recognition of Palestinian statehood legally?
I think that would amount to providing legal advice to the committee.
You can't tell us whether or not Australia would be recognising a terrorist state if Hamas is elected the government of Palestine?
So pathetic.
There's a number of hypotheticals there, and we would not generally respond to hypotheticals here at Estimates.
Can the department confirm that the recognition of Palestine as a state is a legal question that is not tied to the conflict between Israel and Hamas?
Senator, I think Machine has said a couple of times that it's ultimately a political decision that the government has taken. I'm not sure we can provide any further commentary.
Can the department confirm that recognition of Palestine as a state is a legal question that doesn't prevent violence, doesn't get aid through and doesn't release hostages?
Well, I think just have to reiterate the point that Mr. G and Machine have made, that ultimately it is a political decision.
Fair to say that's a pretty frustrating series of responses from the officials today. I mean, Minister, the truth is that this decision to recognise Palestine wasn't about achieving peace in the Middle East. It wasn't about the situation on the ground. It was around, frankly, satisfying your party's membership base, which I know you feel very strongly about this issue.
So in summary, we know that there were no questions that were answered in a proper way over here. In summary, the answer to every single one of her questions is no. Is there a territory that's been agreed upon for this quote-unquote state of Palestine? No. Is there a government that has been agreed upon for this state of Palestine? No. Is there any criteria that makes up a recognized state or recognized country? Has anything been agreed upon? The answer, of course, is no. And so this sort of dancing around it by these officials is pretty unnerving to Senator Chandler. The real idea and the concept of a two-state solution at this point in time is absolute fantasy. And the reason is because, first of all, Hamas is obviously not a peace partner, and it seems to be pretty agreed upon over here that nobody around the world, even the Western leaders that were open to creating a Palestinian state, even they said that Hamas can't play a role in it. Okay, fine, fair and good. But there is no Palestinian body or government that has the qualifications that are necessary to create the potential for a state. In that, the more moderate Palestinian Authority that lives in the so-called West Bank, these are people that are still paying pay for slay, which means that if someone from the West Bank does a terrorist attack against Israelis, that family or that person who's sitting in jail now is compensated for their heroic terror they perpetrated against Israel. And so you cannot have a two-state solution with a government that recognizes terror against you. Why would Israel agree or come to the table even with a group of people that are set out for its destruction? And it's not something that you can just sign on paper and hope for the best. It has to be something that is implemented in the practical right now to make all sorts of governmental, societal, cultural reforms. And then the discussion of a two-state and where that should be, how that could exist, and what that government might look like, what those borders might look like. Only then can that discussion even be on the table. But you don't sign a proclamation or agree on a two-state solution with hopes and dreams about the future, that they're not going to teach their kids from children's television programming that the goal of life is to kill Jews and Israelis. It's just not, you cannot make a deal with that unless that has been changed. Culturally, governmentally, there has to be a change in place that's already going on for, I would say, a generation before there can be even discussion about so-called two-state solutions. That's just my thought. I'd love to hear yours if you have something different to say, and if you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.